Gateway to heaven or hell. Please turn with me to Genesis chapter 28. It's a famous story. It occurred over 4,000 years ago. It's the story of Jacob's ladder. And in Genesis 28, starting in verse 12, we read of this dream. And he, Jacob, dreamed, and behold, a ladder. Now the word there, ladder, is sulam in the Hebrew, which could mean stairway. And if you look at this slide, you have Jacob sleeping, and he has this vision of a stairway, which is more like this. I kind of personally have a problem with ladder, because ladder, you have rungs. And I have a hard time with angels going down through rungs. But a stairway does make sense, and that is in the Hebrew, was set up on earth. So it had to be established, connected to our realm on earth. And the top of it reached to heaven. So it's connected to God's realm. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it. Now that's in heaven. He also stood in Acts chapter 7, verse 55, when he stood up for Stephen. A little reference there. Now, if you go all the way to verse 17, it reveals something very interesting. And he was afraid and said, "How fearful is this place? This is nothing but the house of God." That is the New Jerusalem. When you make the connections in the Bible, I will read Psalm 23:6 really quick. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life," David said, "and I shall," that's a future, "dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Now it's interesting that New Jerusalem has 12 gates. And here, when you continue in Genesis 28, verse 17, this house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Here you have gate, which could be a portal, an opening, an entrance. And so there's a similar situation of this gateway in the Gospel of John. So let's go to the Gospel of John. Now here, when God was giving the apostles to be selected to Jesus, he ran across Nathanael. And Nathanael, in chapter 1 of John, I'm going to read 51 and 52, ask yourself, is this very similar to Jacob's stairway to heaven? John 1 and verse 51. Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I told you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? Greater things than these shall you see." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God descending and ascending from the Son of Man." So that sounds just like Jacob's ladder. We have both situations, angels going to and fro. Now let's move forward to Acts 1. This is after Jesus was resurrected. He came back to our realm, and he was here for 40 days. Let's go to verse 9. "And after saying these things, as they were looking at him, the apostles, he was taken up, and a cloud received him." Notice the word cloud. "And out of their sight went from our realm into the kingdom's realm, through a cloud." Verse 10, "Now while they were gazing intently up into heaven, as he was going up, two men in white apparel suddenly stood by them, who also said, 'You men of Galilee, why do you stand here looking up into heaven? This same Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven," God's realm, "shall come in exactly the same manner as you have seen him go up into heaven." See, there's the cloud. And what he was saying to the men of Galilee, at the first resurrection, he's going to come back the same way. And it's through a cloud. And guess where they meet at the resurrection? In the sky. The ones caught up alive meet the ones that were dead first and risen. So here you have a cloud. It opened up this gateway. Could this be similar to Jacob's ladder? How about the same one? Or is this part of one of 12 gates that is in New Jerusalem? Let's go to the next verse, and let's go all the way to Matthew 3. Now, the Father spoke twice to Jesus Christ, and he told him how well pleased he was. This is one of them, and it's at the time he was baptized. And in Matthew 3, let's go to verse 16, and we read, "And after he was baptized, Jesus came up immediately out of the water, and behold, the heavens were opened." Cloud, heaven opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove, coming upon him. And lo, a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I have great delight," or I'm well pleased. Now God's voice came through into our realm because heaven opened. Now does he have some kind of speaker system? A very advanced one? Possibly. So if you go to the next event, to Matthew 17, we read in verse 5, "While he was speaking, a bright cloud suddenly overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud." Sounds like the cloud, like Jesus went through the cloud to go into his realm. This cloud is here as well to open up this porthole. "This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I delight. Listen to him." So we got this cloud, and I started thinking cloud. I put cloud in the Bible. I got all these results. And then it showed Exodus, where God used the cloud by day to lead them. That cloud was a way to God to watch over them. This is a porthole. Now, did the New Jerusalem move along? Did the gate move? These are just ideas, but this cloud watched over them. And then they get to Mount Sinai. It says the cloud filled all of Mount Sinai, and the glory of God was there. And you go look up cloud in the Bible and make the connections that is connected many times with the glory of God, this cloud. Now we go to Revelation 11. 11 is where the two witnesses are. They witness for 3.5 years, and the world doesn't like them. They don't like the message of the truth because they are living in a world that is like the time of Noah, and they kill the two witnesses. And we're going to pick it up here, but notice what happens in the similarities of the other verses I mentioned. So we got the two witnesses here, and they're in Jerusalem. And you go to chapter 11, Revelation. Let's begin in verse 9. "Then those of the peoples and tribes and languages and nations shall see their bodies 3.5 days. Now they see from all over the world because they have cell phones and the internet. This is a world event. And for 3.5 days they're dead, symbolizing a day for each year they preached. For they will not allow their bodies to be put into tombs. And those who dwell on the earth shall rejoice over them, and will make merry, and will send gifts to one another, because these two prophets had tormented those who dwell on the earth. Then after the 3.5 days, now notice closely, the Spirit of life from God entered into them." That's like a Lazarus moment. Lazarus was dead for 4 days, and the Spirit of life, the breath of life given to Adam, went into him, and he rose. And they stood on their feet. See, they have gravity that makes them stand on their feet. They're not going to heaven yet. Notice that. They stood on their feet. And great fear fell upon those who were watching them. And they heard a great voice from heaven say, now did that cloud appear? "Come up here." Another speaker moment from another realm. "And they ascended into heaven in a cloud." They just entered the porthole. and their enemies saw them rise. So, I brought this up because you have the cloud, you have the portal. Could it be that when the resurrection occurs, they are transformed and they enter through this cloud, just like Jesus looked down, stood up in Jacob's stairway to heaven, and they go through this porthole? Now, for more proof of this, let's go to Revelation chapter 4. This chapter is known as the throne room of God, where John didn't go there physically, but spiritually. It was a vision. And verse 1. After these things I looked, John says, and behold, a door. Notice the word door, an entrance, opened in heaven. Then John was able to see those things in the throne room. Now let's go to what he wrote earlier, John chapter 10, verses 7 through 9. Therefore Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. Now when you look up this Greek word, it is thura. It means entrance, and even in the Strong's Concordance they say portal. He is the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved. See what happens when you're saved? That's when you enter into the kingdom of God. Has any of you entered into this door? Not yet. We hope to enter. That's why we have to become like a child, it says. But we have to be transformed, because in 1 Corinthians 15, it says no flesh or blood can enter. That's another one. Can't enter through the door. That's why we have to be transformed first into spirit. Now, when you read this next part, it is an eye-opener. It says, and shall go in and out. That's us. We shall go in and out. When I first read this, I said, why would I want to go out? I want to go in the kingdom, Randy. I don't want to go out. And then it occurred to me, golden nugget. Let's go to Isaiah 30. Isaiah 30 is a millennial setting. This is after the first resurrection. Satan's put away for 1,000 years during the millennial time. And though the Lord gives you, verse 20, the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet your teachers, those are the first fruits, shall not be removed into a corner anymore, but your eyes shall see your teachers. So seeing them, these are the people on earth, the human beings will be able to see these spirit beings that came back through the door. You will go in and out of the door. Jesus goes in and out of the door. See, but now we will be able to. And we'll go out because there's work to be done. We must teach the millennial people, and then after the 1,000 years, the rest of the dead are risen in Revelation 20, verse 5. And we will go in and out then too. So, this leads us to a great story in Genesis 11. It's the famous story of the Tower of Babel. Now, after studying this subject about gateways and portals, and I am the door and the cloud, I now have a better grasp of what this story is talking about. And hopefully at the end of this message, you will too. In Genesis chapter 11, and notice the whole earth was of one language and one speech, very advanced. And it came to pass, as they were migrating towards the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar. When you listen to Hebrew scholars, when they found this plain in the land of Shinar, it means a discovery. They discovered something there. Now, could it have been or could it have not? It's something to think about. And they settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, come, let us build us a city and a tower. with its top reaching into heavens. And I thought about that for years. Let them break the atmosphere. They didn't do that. Oh, let them get to the moon. Could they reach God's realm? So something was always wrong with me, didn't settle well in the story of the Tower of Babel. I'm going to propose to you something that does make sense. And we continue in verse 4. And let us establish a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down. How did he come down? Connect the dots. Jacob's stairway to heaven. That's how angels go to and fro. That's how God does. He goes through the porthole, through the door, okay, going in and out. And he came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. And the Lord said, behold, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Now nothing which they have imagined to do will be restrained from them. God had to stop them because they were tapping into something that was going to thwart God's plan. And he stopped them. Verse 7, come, let us, interesting, us, go down there, confuse their language, so that they cannot understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from the place upon the face of all the earth, and they quit building the city. Now, this last verse I'm going to read, I learned a discovery with the word Babel. Therefore the name of it is called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth there, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Now, we've heard it. Hey, stop the babble. It means confusion. God is not an author of confusion. But that word, Babel, did not mean confusion before this event. Do you know what it meant? If you take the word Babel and break it up two ways, it means gate of God. What they were trying to do is build this tower to go through the gateway that Jacob later saw in Jacob's stairway to heaven. But see, it existed before Jacob's vision. Do you understand that? It existed. The New Jerusalem exists now. Paul said, Jerusalem above is the mother of us all. So what they were trying to do with their tech is try to enter into this portal, but God stopped them. Why would he say there's nothing they couldn't do and stop them? Okay? There's a reason for it. I know some of you might think, hey, they're physical beings, they're incapable of nothing. But why would God say they are capable of things? We're in the image of God. Okay? Look what's happening in the last 100 years. Knowledge shall be increased. They were trying to build this tower, and some people think it looked like a pyramid because you have to start wide and then keep going up. Now, pyramids and ziggurats, you know what they say they are in ancient texts? Stairways to heaven. Interesting, huh? Now, this ends the first portion of this message. So now we're going to talk about the other gateway, the gateway to hell. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2, and let's read about this abyss, this place where the demons are in 2 Peter 2:4. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but having cast them into Tartaru, delivered them into chains of darkness to be kept for judgment. So that's where most of the demons are. There are some roaming the earth. Satan is definitely roaming. But all of them are not here. They are locked up, and we'll find out later about that. Let's go to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8. This is a story of a man named Legion. It's because he had a legion of demons in him. Now, if all the demons are in this place in Tartaru, locked up, waiting the day of judgment, how could there be demons in Legion? Because there are a certain amount of demons that are allowed, there's rules, allowed to roam the earth. Now, in Luke chapter 8, let's go there. We're going to read verses 30 to 32. And this verse proves there is an abyss. There is a prison for the demons. Luke 8, let's go to verse 30. And Jesus asked, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many demons had entered into him. Then he begged him that he would not command them to go away into the abyss. There it is right there. They knew of this prison. They knew they broke some rules, and they're talking to Jesus Christ himself. So they begged him not to go into Tartaru. Now for another proof of an abyss, let's go to Revelation chapter 20. This is a day that occurs on Atonement, which symbolizes the chaining up of Satan the devil, the great adversary, for 1,000 years, which parallels the millennium. Now, Revelation 20, I'm going to read verses 1 through 3. Then I saw an angel descending from heaven, having the key of the abyss. See, they get locked there. And a great chain in his hand, and he took hold of the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Then he cast him into the abyss, the same word mentioned with Legion, and locked him up and sealed the abyss over him, so that he would not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were fulfilled. And after this, he ordained that he be loose for a short time. So it will be opened in the future, but he's chained there for 1,000 years in an abyss, in this Tartaru, where most of the demons are now. So let's go to one last verse for Revelation 9, proving the abyss, that there is a gateway to hell. Just like there's a gateway to heaven, there's a gateway to hell. We're going to read verses 1 through 3. And the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to the earth. Now, stars are angels in Revelation 1. And what star fell? None other than Satan the devil, but there was 1/3 of the demons, so it could be another bad guy, but it sounds like Satan. And there was given to him the key to the bottomless abyss. So there's a time when this bottomless abyss during the 5th trumpet plague will be opened, and lots of bad things are going to come out of it. And you could read about that. Locusts come out, and you know they're demons because the locust says they have a king, and we'll read that in verse 11. And they have over them a king, the angel of the abyss. Now I say it proves they are demons because in Proverbs it says that locusts have bands and they have no king. And that's true, they don't have a king. But these do, because they come out of the abyss. They are from the underworld. Okay, and we read onward, verse 11. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, that means destruction. But the name he has in Greek is Apollyon. Now remember that word Apollyon, because that is none other than Satan the devil. He's the god of war, this god of destruction. He wants to destroy everything of God. Okay, now it leads me to the third part of the message. And this is about Cern. Has anybody ever heard of the word Cern, which is actually an acronym? Now, Cern stands for Council of European Research of Nuclear. That's right. It's a large hadron collider, and in fact, it's the largest in the world. I mean, it looks like something out of science fiction movie there. Look at this thing. This is huge. What are they doing over there? Its logo, Cern, has 3 6s. Now there's a reason why there's an extra line going around it, because they wanted to mimic the collider, which we will see. So it was started way back in 1954, and they broke land. September 29th, it was opened, which happens to be the Feast of Trumpets, which happens to be this day that I'm speaking. And here's some of the buildup after some time. And the nations involved now are 22 countries. And you will not find the United States flag there. Some have said because we're building our own collider in Texas, which was stopped in 1992, the Bush administration spent $2 billion of our tax money already digging tunnels over there. You can look it up on Google, put Collider Texas, and you will see its images. Now the scientists there, they're working very diligently, and these are the best in the world. And if you look here, you get this circle. The circumference is 17 miles. It goes down 350 feet deep. And some have said this is what's going to open the abyss. Because once you study it and hear what they're really doing over there in Cern, you start to connect the dots. They have these magnets that are huge. I mean, look at these things. These are magnets that have 100,000 times stronger than the gravitational pull of the Earth. Okay, and what they do at Cern, they take these proton particles and they speed them up to 99.9% of the speed of light. And they have them go in opposite directions. They go in these circles and they finally enter the big one. See? When they enter the big one, they go in opposite directions and they finally, well, this is how they go through right here, through these tunnels. This is 300 feet deep. And then they collide and they make this explosion. Now, you have here matter meeting each other in protons, but when they explode, they are now zeroing in on the unknown. And they admit that. It's called the God particle they have already discovered, but there's much more they don't know. Now, when it explodes, they're mimicking what happened during the Big Bang. And they don't understand when the Big Bang happened that how much matter is made, there should be the opposite of antimatter. But there isn't much antimatter to see. We see matter. But when they explode it, they can tap into antimatter. And they say if they can grab 1 gram of this stuff, which is very difficult, but if they can get 1 gram of it, it's as equivalent to 2 Hiroshima bombs. That's the power. Now, when you get power and scientists, you get military. It just happens in history. Now, see this? They're developing a force field for astronauts. So it fights against cosmic radiation. Now, astronauts? Most astronauts are in the military or had military training. That's just unknown fact. So you're telling me they make this force field around an astronaut so sun flares can't hurt them, that they wouldn't put it on F-14s or super soldiers? Come on. I've always said the next country that invents the force field could take over the world. What are they doing here in Cern? See this man right here? You know what this guy invented? He invented the World Wide Web. And guess where he works? Cern. Because he had so many scientists involved all the way around the world, he had to make some kind of connection to share data. And he created this intranet, and it was born the birthplace of the World Wide Web back in 1989. Okay, so powerful things are happening over there in Cern, Switzerland. Now see that area with the circle? That's the exact spot known as the relics of Apollyon. The god of Apollyon, the king over all the locusts, the one who lets out from the underworld, and they have a circle right there, right where Apollyon is. In that area where the circle was, they found a relic, and it comes from a god named Cernunnos. Hear it? Cern, newness. He is half man, half beast. Notice the torques? Those torques are known to have power. See the circle? They have powers. And Cernunnos is known to be Lord over the animals. If you look up this god, it's a Celtic god, but you can trace it all the way back. Every civilization that has gods, that they trace back to the Romans, to the Greeks, to the Egyptians, and you go all the way back, and they're all biblical figures. Zeus was Adam, Hera was Eve, and they had 2 sons, and you go on. And Cernunnos, if you trace them back, it goes back to Nimrod. So Nimrod is a type of beast power at the end. Beast, half man, half animal. See? And outside of Cern is something interesting. It's the only company, scientific company, that has a mascot of a god. And notice how the statue's shadow hits the Cern building. And when you look at this statue, you'll see a circle. And the circle represents the universe. See all the flames around it? And it controls the universe. Now, this god is called Shiva. And it's the only god of all the thousands of gods that can create and destroy. And what it wants to do is destroy because it can start the process again. Isn't that like man? He does good, he does evil. He does good, he does evil. That's the way of Satan the devil. That's the broad path. By the way, when Jesus mentioned there's a narrow path that's good, and then there's the broad path that leads to what? Destruction is the same word, Apollyon. The broad way leads to destruction. And notice that this God is standing on something. A little dwarf. And you know what that dwarf is called? The dwarf of ignorance, representing mankind as just something it steps on. See that? And it is the logo, the mascot of Cern. Now see the scientist right here that works at Cern? He's an Italian guy, and his name's Sergio Bertolucci. He's director of research. Now, why would he say this? Quote, unknown of unknowns. For instance, an extra dimension. He mentioned we are seeking an extra dimension. Quote, out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it. I thought Cern was just about particles colliding and just observing and marking down notes and learning about science. Why would he be talking about a doorway and something might be coming through? The head researcher? So, what was he talking about, this door? He was talking about the main 8-spoke Atlas detector. This is what leads into the machine where all the stuff happens. Now notice how many spokes it has. It has 8. See the circle in the middle and the 8? What else has 8 in a circle in the middle? We have Hinduism, which is the sun wheel. Now, Randy, that's just the sun wheel that they made, like on a wagon. Well, that's not what they say. They say it has powers. Go investigate. Put in Hinduism in the sun wheel and hear what they say about it. Now you go to the next one. Buddhism has the Dharma wheel. Do you know what they call it? They call it phenomenon. That's what they call it, phenomenon. Phenomenon? That means some mystic things can come out of it. Now, these are devices that connect the underworld. Now, the next device I'm going to show you, ask yourself, does this connect the underworld? Witchcraft. How many spokes do you count? 8, with the circle in the middle. And they connect with evil spirits. It's a device. You go to the next, and Babylon had it. It's called the Tablet of Shamash. Now, look at this picture. Does that sound like there's some powers in this device? They think it had powers because it most likely did. Were they trying to tap into something? Did they tap into something? Or was it not the time? God stopped Babel. He might have stopped them as well. See, the demonic world influences these people that work with this device because they want to connect them to the underworld. Now, we have the Dome of the Rock. We have 8 sections with a circle in the middle. And you have the Pope. Pope himself holds up a monstrance. Now this monstrance has 8 spokes with a circle in the middle. It's basically a sun idol. It's all connected to Baal and sun worship. Why is the Pope holding that? Do you think Jesus Christ held something like that, connected back to pagan days? Now, where does the Pope serve? In the Vatican. When you go to the Vatican, you get 8 spokes with a circle in the middle with an obelisk. An obelisk, what is that? It represents a male part. I don't need to tell you which one, but why is it there in the middle of this blueprint, out there in the middle of nowhere? And you have the ancient Mayans. Now look at this. If any one of these didn't convince you, look at this one. The Mayans on the top here have a device, and they say a serpent tail connects it to the underworld. What were they trying to tap into? And you know, if you've seen movies, you see tons of movies. In the 90s, all these movies about aliens coming, man fighting the aliens, prepping man to fight in the Battle of Armageddon. Well, in the Battle of Armageddon, they lose. But in these movies, they win. And there's tons of movies that foreshadow things to come. And so when you see this device in movies that are coming out now, at least 20, 25 of them, I'm going to show you a few. You have the movie Stargate. Count the spokes. They went through it on a porthole. In fact, evil things came out of it. Evil Egyptian gods. Interesting. Demons. That's Stargate, the movie. Who's writing those scripts? We have the latest Avenger movie. How many spokes? There's 8. It was a portal. In fact, from the sky came all these evil power dudes from another world. What does that symbolize? We have a cartoon called Big Hero 6, came out about 4 months ago. You have 8 spokes with the circle in the middle. I saw the movie. This lady goes into there and she gets trapped in an underworld in another dimension, and they couldn't get her out for like years, 20 years she was gone. You have a new toy coming out called Lego Dimensions. Count them. There's 8, and I saw the commercial. They put a little Lego in there and it goes to another world, into Lego World. Okay? So, the last one I'm going to show you, you got to understand something. That Satan the devil has always used cartoons, comedy, to make his point. And how innocent this looks, this next one, I saw the movie twice. I thought it was adorable. It's called Monsters, Inc. Now, monsters that live in another realm, they go through these doorways. Doorways, I am the door, Jesus says. They're monsters, and then there's many of them. Many demons, and they all have these doorways. And guess what happens when they enter them? They go into our world and they scare the children. Christ says we must become like little children. Here we have monsters scaring the little children through portholes. Could this Cern be opening up a doorway that leads to the underworld? They tried to do it in the past with Babel and maybe with those other devices, but there will be a time in Revelation 9 that a key is given to a fallen star, and this doorway is open, and we do not want to be around then. We do not. And for the last verse, I want to go to Matthew 16, because with knowledge, with connections in the Bible, we can now understand more about the Bible. So let's begin in Matthew 16 and verse 17. And Jesus answered and said to him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood did not reveal it to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I say also to you that you are Peter, that's the little pebble, but upon this rock, not Peter, upon the rock, Jesus Christ, I will build my church. And the gates of the grave shall not prevail against it. I was taught that this was hellfire and that we won't die out in the lake of fire. But when you start to understand what gates are, and look at this picture, when that's open, the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. When you read Revelation 7, it says that God's people are sealed. They're protected. And it says when they're let out, the locusts, it says they will not harm God's people. When you read the 10 plagues in Egypt, there were certain plagues that didn't go into Goshen where they lived. They were protected. So we want to be protected. We want to be with God, and He promises us that if we do what's right, keep His commandments, then instead of being affected by that gate, we actually go to the one that's the New Jerusalem, which Jacob says, I saw the house of God. That is the one that we want to go in the gate, and we can also go out of the gate, but there will be a time when it will be the new heavens and the new earth, and that New Jerusalem will come down to the new earth. Then we will dwell forever in the house of God.